Okay, welcome everyone. This is a final conversation in a series of 4 talks with industry this spring on topics related to data, ethics, and leadership. Today's seminar is co-presented by the Harvard Data Science Initiative and the Harvard John A. Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And special thanks to our colleagues at McKinsey Company for their help in organizing. Today's seminar is being moderated by Professor James Mickens from SEAS. James, please take it away.
Thanks. As Jen said, my name is James Mickens. I'm a professor of computer science at Harvard, and more importantly, I am a human in this world. And what does that mean? Well, among other things, it means that I interact with technology all the time. And those interactions generate a huge stream of data that I share with my phone, with my online services, with friends and families and employers. All of this raises an important question. How do I establish trust with the companies that collect, process, and distribute my data? So for example, why should I believe that a business is using best practices to defend against data breaches and other security problems? Why should I believe that when I opt out of data tracking for marketing purposes, a business actually stops tracking my data for marketing purposes? All of these kinds of questions involve digital trust. How businesses implement it and how businesses give users confidence that sensitive data is being handled appropriately. So in today's seminar, we have 2 great folks to discuss these issues. First, we have Eric. He's a vice president at Kraft Heinz, where he leads the global teams responsible for IT functional capabilities. And in his 20-year career at Kraft Heinz, he has held roles in engineering, logistics, and various aspects of IT. So welcome, Eric. We also have Kate, who is a senior partner at McKinsey. She works with clients to improve their data analyses and modernize their technical infrastructure. She's been a core leader of McKinsey's efforts to help retailers and other consumer-facing companies. And in particular, she has worked with companies to rethink consumer engagement models, to better understand the disruptive impact of new technologies and find new growth opportunities. Welcome, Kate. And so with that, I will now step aside and let Eric and Kate provide their views on digital trust. Kate, why don't you start first?
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks so much, James. And I love the notion of being a human in this world and how we think about that from a very human standpoint. So we're going to pick up on that as we go through. But there are so many different topics we could have chosen today to talk about. And we chose digital trust. And I would love to understand, Eric, a little bit more from you about why are you so passionate about this topic? What is it that really kind of gets you going on it?
Well, like you and like James, I'm also a human in this world. So one of those is exactly as James described. It's about ensuring that my data is being protected in other places besides Kraft Heinz, right? So I want to know that when I opt out of something, it's actually happening. I also have 3 small children. I'm extremely worried about the world that they're going to grow up in with social media, data tracking, you're the product as versus a product being the product. So, I mean, these are things that weigh on my mind on a daily basis. That's one thing. The second thing with my kind of, Kraft Heinz hat on would be one of the biggest opportunities for large CPGs like us is our digital transformation. We're putting tremendous resources, time and money against the digital transformation of the business. Having the appropriate digital trust will enable us to do that in a way that allows for kind of perpetual and continual growth, as versus doing something big and then collapsing on ourselves because we find out that we've done something horribly wrong from the digital trust side of the equation. So I think about digital trust like this. This is like a framework that we use to assess and track our readiness to manage the risks associated with data and AI. We are going to exponentially increase the amount of data and the related AI technologies that we use. Already in the last couple of years, this has gone up exponentially, and it will continue to go up exponentially into the future. So we have to be awesome at the management and the privacy of the data that we're using to drive our digital transformation. So for me, getting awesome at this is directly proportional to kind of how awesome we can be with our digital transformation. This is the connection I make in my brain.
I love that. And I think you've had the great privilege of having a real kind of front row seat on what it takes to scale digital transformation across Kraft Heinz. And one of the things we see in our research is that digital trust, or building digital trust, is a real driver of innovation and growth, right? It's not just the thing you have to do because everybody will tell you off if you don't. It genuinely drives innovation and growth. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about how you at Kraft Heinz have thought about that balance? Because there is often a tension, healthy or otherwise, between the need and the want to run fast after that innovation, and some of the pulls on, am I doing it safely? Am I building that confidence that you just talked about? How do you balance that tension?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to buy your chief privacy counsel lots of gifts and other things to make sure that they're comfortable in coming along on the ride with you. In addition to that, I mean, we have to accept the fact, first of all, that we are going to learn and we are going to fail when we're doing innovation, right? So when we're doing innovation, we know that there's things we are going to get wrong. We have to make sure that we've kind of built this playground or this sandbox in a way where we can do this in a safe manner so that I can make mistakes and the consequences can be small. I can learn and then we can decide whether we scale or not. But back to the joke about buying flowers for the privacy council. I mean, there is a big kind of educational component to this as well, to understand not only what the needs are from kind of the legal side of the house, but also educating the legal teams on what's happening kind of outside of Kraft Heinz, right? So as we look at other companies that are doing innovation or developments that are happening in industry, so there's very much an exercise to kind of bring everybody along on this journey to make sure they're aware of what's happening and their concerns are being heard. And then it's also creating kind of this safe space where we can go in and do this experimentation in a small scale, in a managed way where, if we do run into problems, we can address before it becomes a much larger issue.
And almost at the heart of what you're saying there is the need to keep learning, right? Whether that's learning externally about where really is the bar, where really is the art of the possible on that, and also learning internally in terms of running these experiments and so on. How do you at Kraft Heinz maintain that velocity almost of learning to make sure that you're not falling behind on either of those things?
Yeah, so amazingly, we have a chief learning officer, and so this is a new-ish role for Kraft Heinz, and her name is Pam May, and she does a fantastic job of bringing kind of relevant and pertinent topics to the broader organization, and then curating content for specific areas of the business based on like what's happening, right? So we make use of our whole kind of like learning infrastructure to bring that level of education, but the reality is like a lot of those canned courses take time to come to fruition, right? So I mean, for example, I use LinkedIn Learning a lot. Usually once a day in the mornings, I'll do a course. And from a month ago till now, the number of ChatGPT classes that popped up on LinkedIn Learning or generative AI classes that popped up on, I mean, it was amazing, right? I mean, it literally went like this overnight. So, I mean, a month ago, there was like 3 courses from 2019, and they were all done by scientists, and I don't think anybody saw one of them. And now if you go there, you'll see at least a dozen different courses on generative AI. So it's one of those situations where you can, in some cases, grab this kind of like canned external content and you can cascade it to keep people abreast. But there is very much, you're getting this information from industry, you're getting it from the people on your teams, you're getting it from your data scientists. And I mean, look, to use the ChatGPT example, I mean, this thing literally exploded. So, from 2 months ago or 3 months ago till now, I mean, I'm getting emails and pings from really, really smart people saying things like, it's going to revolutionize my business. And, I no longer have to do my laundry. It's going to be done by ChatGPT, and I no longer have to mow my lawn. It'll be done by ChatGPT. And so, I mean, part of that is part of the roles of a technology leader is to make sure we're kind of like responsibly managing the messaging, and we're keeping people informed about what's real and what's not real on the different types of technology that are available. And, I mean, ChatGPT may eventually do your laundry, but it is not today. That's for sure. So
if it's any consolation, I have a picture in my laundry room that says, Siri, please do my laundry. So I'm totally with you. I'm going to change it to ChatGPT. What I'm really interested in there, though, is because I agree with you on the explosion of this, and from a tech geek point of view, which I will self-profess to be, it's incredibly exciting, right? And then just the pace of change and so on is phenomenal in this space. But in some ways as well, never has it been more important for us to have digital trust, given the pace that this is running at. Can you maybe talk a little bit about maybe what keeps you up at night in thinking about that pace of ChatGPT or generative AI more broadly, with, you know, what holds you back almost? So what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, so the pace of change is accelerating. I mentioned LinkedIn Learning earlier. There's a Professor Reichdahl on there that does a good course on the fourth industrial revolution, and he talks a bit about the amount of time to get to, I think it was 10 million users of the telephone, which was 75 years. And it took, I don't know, like 19 hours to get 10 million users of Pokemon Go, right? Just to kind of give you a sense of how quickly or how much we've changed, how much we've accelerated the adoption of technology. And so like, I think first we have to just acknowledge that it's not going to go the other way, right? So this is a one-way street. It only goes one direction, and the pace of change, the pace of technological change will only continue to increase. We have to be comfortable that that is a reality. And, you know, in the case of like ChatGPT or generative AI, just to keep picking on that for a moment, I mean, we also have to accept what we can and can't control. You know, I mean, you know, Kraft, Heinz, or any organization can go to their employees, and, you know, and we sent out a very nicely worded email that said, you know, here are the risks associated with adopting this technology. But at the end of the day, people are people, and we have to acknowledge the fact that, you know, they're interested because they see it on the news as well, and, you know, they probably are going to make use of it, even if you send the nicely worded email notifying them. So, you know, so for us, it's really, and this kind of comes back to the digital trust concept. I mean, it's like, this is like a framework that you're using to basically kind of like prioritize what the biggest risks or the biggest opportunities are for you as an organization, right? So, yeah. I mean, you know, a more detailed example would be like, if we want to build a predictive attrition model, so maybe I want to be able to predict the likelihood of somebody resigning, right? In order for me to do that, I'm going to need a lot of demographic information about my employees, both the people that are here as well as the people that have left, right? So that I have this rich data set so that I can then start to kind of like build this model. That is hugely, the level of risk there is much, much higher because we are talking about personal data of human beings in this world, as versus us building a model to optimize where I should put the next pallet of mac and cheese, right? So when I make a pallet of mac and cheese in Champaign, Illinois, I could put it one of 50 places. The question is, where should I put it, right? So it's got to leave Champaign, we know that, but it's got to go somewhere. Where do I take this pallet and put it in the United States so that it's in the right place, so that, you know, when somebody goes and buys more mac and cheese at Walmart, we can replenish them quickly. The type of data that we're talking about there has a much different risk profile associated with it, right? So you know, in the situation of where do I put the next pallet of mac and cheese, I could choose an accelerated path to both collect that data and build and test my models. In the case of something like predictive attrition, the response that we took was we put together a data ethics council, which is staffed by people from HR, people from our IT security team, our privacy council, who gets lots of flowers and chocolates, to make sure that we have kind of balanced representation as we're looking at these more sensitive pieces of data, so that we're appropriately, we're managing appropriate to risk. Yeah.
I love that. And by the way, I suspect everybody else on this Zoom is thinking the same thing as me, which is, please put that pallet of mac and cheese in my backyard, and I'll be very happy. So I'm sure you'll get requests. I do just want to touch on this point about you know, humans being humans within this as well, because in many ways, and we saw this through a lot of the cybersecurity attacks, you know, that really escalated over the last sort of 3 to 5 years as well. Often the tricky part of this is the human. It isn't the technology, it isn't the way that you've architected and so on, it's the human error that sits on top of that. In what you described, ultimately you can have the Data Ethics Council and all of that good stuff behind the scenes. But how do you convince that person for whom you're doing the modeling on their attrition, how do you convince them that you can be trusted as an employer before we even get to customers or anything else, what are the steps you take to assure them around this?
Yeah, and I think that I don't know that you ever like finish the 5 tasks and then it's complete. So, you know, I mean, this is absolutely a journey, and quite frankly, you know, it's one that I think we continue to be on, and probably many organizations like ours, because, you know, I go back to, I'm also a human in this world. Like I'm constantly wondering, is it ever good enough? You know, when you're thinking about something kind of as important as personal information about people, like in the predictive attrition, I think there's that healthy balance of kind of trust but verify. So, you know, we are in the right circumstances, we are providing tools that allow people to use different models that have a different, varying levels of sensitive data. We also have put extensive effort into data exfiltration, monitoring, data lifecycle protection monitoring, and things like that, right? Because, you know, as you said, machines generally are pretty predictable. You know, I mean, you tell them to do something, they tend to do it. It's the humans that are a little bit more difficult to control and to understand what they did and why they did it. And so, you know, I mean, there is very much that like educational component about how we handle sensitive data. So for instance, at Kraft Heinz, everybody in the company needs to, on an annual basis, they have to go through what I think is a pretty hard test on data privacy. And I say that because actually the fail rate is maybe higher than most of the courses that we give. It's a very challenging course. And then also adherence, if you don't take that test, it becomes, or the successful execution of this test is a qualifier for all of our bonuses. So literally, this is something that is mandatory as a company. We have to achieve compliance with this training in order for the bonus to be paid. So, I mean, what I love about that is like, it's really hard for people to think, well, they don't really care, because it's like, okay, well, you know what, guys, the CEO is not getting his bonus unless we all take this privacy test. So you show me somebody else that cares more. I would like to know about it, because I think this is a pretty clear connection between, you know, our compensation and what we're saying is important to us, which is something that makes it really easy to kind of stand for this as a leader in an organization, you know, when you can point to that and go, this is how serious we are.
And what I love about that as well is the fact that you're making digital trust everybody's, I was going to say problem, let's say opportunity, everybody's opportunity, and not just, you know, the behest of the legal team and the, you know, data team and the technology team. You've genuinely made it something that the entire organization should care about, right? Which I think is pretty special and pretty unique on this. I'd love to come back to talent for a second and just take a little bit of a pivot around that. A lot of what we've talked about is new for many organizations. It is also, as you've rightly said, an evolving space, right? A space that is probably never going to be less than what it is today. How have you at Kraft Heinz, therefore, thought about the talent that you need, either different profiles, different needs along that journey? How's that changed the way you've thought about it?
I mean, the focus on privacy and data security are both areas that are growing. They're both areas of invest for us, right? So as we think about how we kind of, you know, staff and support the data privacy component as well as the data security piece, the level of investment has increased dramatically, and has been kind of commensurate with our investment in just overall digital transformation, right? So I mean, you know, as we've continued down this journey of digital transformation, I mean, like what you quickly realize is that you can't do digital without data. Okay, so this is check one, right? And then the next thing you find out is all your data sucks, right? So you know, I mean, this is the patented McKinsey digital transformation approach, right? You can't do digital without data. Oh my God, all your data is bad. So then you know, the question is, how do we, you know, now we have to get serious about the management and the quality and the privacy and the security of our data, because it will be the underpinning of our broader digital transformation. So, you know, once you acknowledge kind of what those opportunities are, then the focus for talent becomes straightforward in that you know what you're looking for. The problem is actually finding these people, which is a different problem, right? So, you know, as I'm sure McKinsey experiences as well as you know, many folks that are probably joining us on the webinar today, cybersec is a super hot area right now. Data science is a super hot area. And then also, kind of the intersection with legal it is tough to find skilled resources as well. So then you get into this, do you rent talent? Do you retain, do you retrain talent, right? Or do you hire? I mean, and I think the answer is probably all three, just depending on kind of what you've got available, because it's unlikely in my experience that you're just going to go and get everything you need at one store.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And if I think about, we've got some of the best and brightest minds, tuning into this as we speak, who are all deciding, what are the things that they should be studying in order to get into this field. What advice would you have for that group in terms of how they should think about the skills that they need?
Well, I mean, the cliche is like, you need to learn how to learn. I'm 100% there. Look, if you want to be in technology, and I'm not sure kind of what the diversity is of the audience that we have, but I mean, if the aspiration is to be in technology and it's to be in data science or data engineering, or you want to do application development, I mean, just accept the fact that whatever you're probably learning right now will be less valuable 3 years from now, because of the fact that it's, the technology area is going to evolve very quickly. There's another there's an HBS professor, Boris Groysberg, and he presented a concept to us recently where he said, look, you should think about your knowledge as a depreciating asset, and it goes down 20% a year, give or take. So then the question is, of course, are you doing enough to compensate for that depreciation, right? So are you making the necessary investment to compensate for your 20% depreciation of kind of the value of your skill set every year? I think it's completely appropriate within the technology space as well, which is why I try and do as many courses and things like that. And I build with microcontrollers and things like that, because I have to keep myself kind of like ingrained in what's happening to stay with it. And so for the folks that are continuing or considering opportunities in technology, I mean, really embrace the fact that this is a continual learning type of role. If this is something that excites you, this is a great place to be, right? If not, maybe like history would be a more appropriate location, because I think in theory you could probably learn it once and then continue to repeat it over and over again, maybe, but not here.
That was for those listening. That was Eric's jibe at me, because I technically have a history degree.
But you came to the light, right? You left the dark side and you came to the light.
Exactly right. Critical thinking will rule again, I tell you. But I think it is really interesting. And even as you started this, you talked about, your LinkedIn learning that you do habitually every single day. And I think certainly the best technology leaders that I see across the globe regard themselves not just as experts in things, but students of things as well. And I often find it when I'm interviewing folks as well, some of the top tech talent, I always ask them, what are you a teacher of, right? What are you an expert in? And what are you a student of? And I can tell you get the most fascinating answers by doing that one, if anyone wants to try. I'm intrigued, before we go to kind of what this means for some of the more senior folks that you work with, at Kraft and elsewhere. Is your advice any different for your kids? Right, you talked about having 3 kids in this as well. There are maybe a younger age group than the group we have on the line today. Is that different? Is this going to change over time? How do you think about skills on a longer term trajectory?
So I have 3 daughters. The oldest one is 13. The youngest one is 7. The middle is 10. The middle one, I'm pretty sure, is going to be in IT. I'm feeling pretty good about that one at 10 years old. So we've been doing some preparation conversations. I mean, what I tell them about kind of the use of data and technology is that if you're not paying for something, you're the product. So be very conscious of that. My 13-year-old, of course, loves TikTok, and oh, Dad, I can't believe it's free. I'm like, nope, not free. They're monetizing you. That's how this works. They are monetizing you. So I want them to have an appreciation for what the economics are in this equation, right? And I'm picking on TikTok just because it's kind of easy to pick on them at the moment, but the same holds true for many of the services that we hold near and dear, like Google search. right? I mean, Google search is free, it's ubiquitous, and you are the product that Google is monetizing with Google search. And that's okay. I mean, that's their business model, but I want my kids to kind of understand how this works. And it's not just kind of for free, and it's not just for fun. Like, there are dollars and cents behind this, and I want them to be able to make the connection. And I encourage but because they're young, I am probably like many parents on the phone, I keep things pretty tight on what they can access and what they can't access at this point. I mean, obviously the older they get, the more challenging this becomes. But, at this point, if you're a parent and you're wondering how you can, keep a tighter rein, both Android and iOS have very good parent control policies or, content moderation policies that allow you to prevent them downloading applications, them using the device too much, them, receiving explicit content, etc. So there is a lot of good material. There's a lot of good free services out there that can help you manage that.
Yep. And, even if we take it beyond kids, we've all heard the sound bites over the last couple of years about how the pandemic has accelerated certainly adoption engagement with digital channels at a rate we've not seen hitherto. Are there specific things that you're now doing differently as a result of that? Because this notion of many times you don't know that you're the product. I think there are many more people engaging now who maybe don't have that natural savviness around it. Has that changed how you communicate with your very broad customer base, and have you seen changes as a result of that acceleration?
Yeah, absolutely. So to take a step back for a moment, and probably for many people in the audience, this will resonate with you. But what we saw pre-COVID, food and beverage was relatively immune to e-commerce as a sales channel, right? Mm-hmm. So the vast majority, and I want to say it was like 99% or something of food and beverage in the US, I'm speaking, was purchased in store, right? So you would go into a store and you would buy what you needed and then you left. And then COVID happened, right? And then people decided maybe, risking my life is not worth picking out my own watermelon. So then their perspective changed. And so in a very short period of time, we saw it go from, I think, 1% to 5 or 6% in a very, very short period of time, which is huge. I mean, because of, obviously how much food we buy in the United States, this is a significant shift. And so that meant people ordering their food online, right? And in many cases, this was like a click and collect type of thing. So, you would order it maybe on your phone at home or whatever, and then you would drive to the store and they would put it in your trunk. And similar to the conversation about technology adoption earlier, this is a one-way street so far. So it didn't go back. So when COVID ended, we didn't see people stop doing click and collect. It's the opposite. So you're still seeing adoption increase. So the so what for a company like Kraft, Heinz, or many other companies in the food and beverage space is that this has changed the buying experience for a meaningful number of your customers, right? And this will continue, that number will increase over time. So then the question is, what do you do as an organization to kind of meet those people where they are now in a way that they want to be met? So, first we saw this channel swap, right? So you went from kind of entirely in person to now there's a good chunk that are going through some type of electronic commerce channel. Click and collect, Amazon.com, et cetera, right? So you saw this big shift. So that was step one, is you have to then now change how you approach people. And then step two is you have to give them the right experience that keeps them coming back, right? So like a company like Kraft Heinz, we don't, with a few examples, with a few exceptions, but small ones, we don't sell directly to Liz, right? We sell to Walmart, who sells to Liz, or we sell to Albertsons, who sells to Liz. And so we have to approach consumers in a way that gets them excited to click through and go to Walmart and put that, box of mac and cheese in their cart, as a for instance. And so we now have to change how we think about engaging with consumers and giving them that kind of delightful experience that keeps them coming back. Which is, and then you start to get into a lot of these kind of emerging MarTech type technologies. We did wiener coins. So, we own Oscar Mayer. I'm going to try and rile up James a bit. So we did some NFTs.
Blockchain.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we did NFTs with that we called wiener coins. So we made our own cryptocurrency as part of Art Basel in Miami, as a for instance, right? So this is like kind of a part loyalty program. This is part, to be in the news and to be talked about, to kind of generate that excitement, to get the click through. So through that entire journey, we have to create the opportunity. We have to be transparent about what data we're collecting. We have to be transparent about how they can stop, how they can request for us to stop managing that data if they want to opt out. So you get into this, very important topic of preference management. So when, how does Liz approach Kraft Heinz and tell us, hey, we no longer want you to, I no longer want you to hold my personal data.
Yeah. And I love the notion here of actually almost inviting that level of interaction, that level of engagement. I think that's one of the other shifts that has happened with greater awareness around, actually often triggered by cybersecurity and so on, but triggered by, but certainly awareness and engagement with these issues on behalf of the consumer, I think has started to change the dynamic there. One of the things I think you're alluding to, but I want to just pull the thread a little bit, is, can digital trust actually help to strengthen the relationship with customers or build stronger relationships with your customers? How have you thought about that, particularly as someone who is not selling direct to Liz, but you're selling, through others?
So, I think this one is tricky. Man, if you screw it up, you're in big trouble. So that I think probably everybody would agree with. So one of the conversations we had with McKinsey when we worked on some digital trust activities at Kraft Heinz last year was like, who owns this? Whose job is digital trust? And it's actually a fairly difficult thing to answer when you start to look at the constituencies that are involved there. I think where we netted out was we think about it principally as a risk management capability, right? So kind of more aligned with maybe audit or legal as versus aligned with like the commercial business, right? So, this isn't something where, the president of a business unit is saying like, we got to double digital trust next year, right? It's not that they don't care. It's that, we're managing this as kind of a risk management framework as versus an accelerator, but that doesn't mean it doesn't accelerate. So, to me, it's one of those things where it's like, I think you will experience a substantial deceleration if you screw this up, which is why it is so important to get this right from the beginning. And obviously, if you're like a Kraft Heinz and you're at, we started our digital transformation in earnest in early 2020. So this was kind of right around the time the pandemic happened, right? And we started focusing on a lot of the components of digital trust very shortly thereafter, because we started to kind of very plainly see the connection between these things and the speed or the lack of speed we were getting on our digital transformation as a result. So, for us, we look at this as risk management, realizing that as good as you are at this will have a direct proportion as will directly impact how good you are at your digital transformation.
I love that. So can I, if I horribly summarize what I think you just said, effectively your data governance, right, your risk management frameworks around this is kind of your Trojan horse for really establishing digital trust across the organization. Is that fair? Have I heard you right?
So data governance is actually specifically, this is an area that previously had been federated amongst multiple areas of the business. We're now kind of re-centralizing this to further strengthen the importance of this and the significance that it has across our overall digital transformation. So data governance is absolutely a key component to this. And we used the McKinsey model when we were looking at digital trust. So we kind of framed it up amongst the different pillars. It's kind of the old analogy is like people, process, and technology. It's the three-legged stool. All of those things are present here when we talk about things like digital trust. And so we go after all of those. So things like data governance are very focused on the process component. The tool set here tends to be your different technologies, your databases themselves. So we use things like Snowflake, and we use things like HANA. Databricks would be another example of a large cloud database. We make use of data governance technology, so tools like Calibra. And then you're also using a suite of security tools to monitor data lifecycle protection and data exfiltration and things like that. And then on the people side, as we talked about, I mean, it's basically defining the roles and empowering them to do what needs to be done to be successful. So I think you could do a lot worse than using data governance as your Trojan horse. Let me say it like that, right? Because it touches enough of those topics where you're going to have really, really good traction. The thing you got to be careful on, I would suggest for those that are going down this path, would be the legal component, making sure that there's strong engagement with Privacy Council and the overall kind of legal framework, because I think maybe traditional data governance wouldn't be as tightly coupled with the legal component, which is kind of a big deal here, right? Because of the evolving legislation. I mean, I think this is why we have to keep buying flowers for our legal counsel, is because the laws keep on changing every 3 weeks. And, especially if you're a global company, we operate in 40 countries. And so, you obviously have to adhere to everybody's law, not just the biggest country. And so, understanding what's happening and being able to adapt is a huge component to digital trust. And unfortunately, a lot of that falls on the lawyers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, in some ways, actually, I think that's only getting more hard than not. I hope you'll have a chance at some point for another session all about the sort of geopolitical implications of this for digital trust, for digital sovereignty and so on. But that's probably one for another day. I want to pick up on, you actually talked a second ago about quite an ecosystem of different partners that you're working with, or different software that you're using, different tooling that you're using and so on. How do you think about the importance of collaboration and of partnerships in how you build digital trust? Maybe just sort of go a notch deeper on how you've thought about that at Kraft.
Well, I suspect Kraft is not unique. Because we're a large company, we are not unique in that, we use a number of partners to run the business, right? So I mean, as you look at ways that we interact with consumers, it would be very common for us to build consumer experiences in-house as well as via third parties, right? So, Kraft has hundreds of brands globally. Most of those brands have some type of digital experience, so you can go to Jello.com and you can have a Jello, you can see what's going on with Jello or Oscar Mayer or whatever those different products are. And again, large, complex. So you've got internals, you've got externals. You have to create, you have to acknowledge kind of the complexity that's associated with that and provide an underlying set of tools that allows you to manage that effectively. So, for example, our approach to like brand websites is we provide a common platform on which all brand websites are run. The reason we do that, and this is kind of a non-negotiable for us, right? So you can have a brand website, but it's going to be here. Because of the importance of how we collect that personal information from people when they interact with our websites, right? As well as managing the experience that they're having, we want to provide a consistent service globally. And so, this is a non-negotiable for us, but then we provide this kind of freedom within the framework. So we've established this platform on which you can run all of your brand websites. If you want to hire a third party to build a brand website, that's okay. If you want to build it in-house with your own developers, that's also okay. But everything is being equally penetration tested, scanned, monitored, et cetera, so that we know that we can provide a consistent level of kind of service and security back to our customers, to our consumers, and to ourselves.
Love it. So, one of the reasons, and maybe this is as a history graduate, one of the reasons I love this area is that there actually aren't bright lines, or not many bright lines, in terms of how to think about it, right? And a lot of it comes down to, quite a robust and often emotional set of conversations about, what your risk posture really is. What is the way in which you think about the importance of data in your organization? What's the way in which you think about, the sort of ethics, the way you're putting the bar on some of the ethics, on bias, on model explainability, on all of those kinds of topics. And it isn't a kind of, here's a checklist of the right way to do it. it often comes down to a very cultural thing. And that's why I also loved, Eric, when you talked earlier about how you've made it part of everyone's jobs and everyone's culture at Kraft Heinz. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about, or maybe give some advice to those on the line about how do you make those decisions, right? When they're not clear cut, when it does come into what you believe as a brand and how you want to portray yourself as a brand, how do you think about ethics and data posture? And any advice for the group on that?
I mean, again, I think, this is I don't think we would claim to be experts in this space because it's incredibly complex and the area is very dynamic. I mean, the concept of data ethics is one that we understand and we care about. So we've been doing this for a couple of years now. Initially we got kind of the sideways look like, what? And now we're in this situation where people just go, yeah, got it, right? This data is important, and the consequence of using important data is that we need to take time to properly assess what it is, so that we can do right by everybody. So the way when these tough decisions come up, you have to make them in a transparent way, so that people understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I mean, I had a boss who used to say kind of like principles over process. So these principles never change, right? In Kraft Heinz we have our Kraft Heinz values. So one of our values is we do the right thing. Hey, I mean, like, you can very easily look at a request and say, is this the right thing? And people kind of step back and go, ooh, let me think about this. So I mean, you have to kind of come back to the culture of the organization. The culture is largely created and maintained. It's created and maintained by the leaders in it and by the values that we share as a group. So when the tough gets going and you're having this kind of like really difficult conversation about, is it appropriate to do this or is it not appropriate to do this? I mean, ultimately you're going back to the values of that organization and you're deciding like, does this meet our criteria for doing the right thing for our employees? Does this represent us living our values as an organization?
And in some ways, back to that notion of the Trojan horse, I've often found that it's a wonderful Trojan horse for reassessing some of those things, reassessing and reaffirming some of those things.
The Eric Nelson protocol is, I think about, does this make Kraft Heinz a place I would want my kids to work? That's how I think about it. So for me, this is a very easy way for me to make decisions that maybe seem difficult at first. Like, does this make me proud to work at Kraft Heinz? Does it make Kraft Heinz a place I want my kids to work?
Lovely. I love that. I think we've got time for one more question that I want to sneak in before we go to the Q&A, and there's already many coming through that are going to be very interesting. Given this notion of your passion and commitment to lifelong learning, what are the key trends or developments that you are watching closely in this space?
I'm not going to lie. I did take like 5 generative AI classes in the last 2 weeks. So if you looked at my LinkedIn history, I've drained most of them. But before that, I'm very interested in neural networks, just kind of in general, what they do, how they work, what the use case applications are. I'm very interested in reinforcement learning as a technology, because we make a lot of stuff. So we have 60, 70 factories globally. So we produce a lot of products. Reinforcement learning is a technology that you can use to be really good at chess. You can also use it, or Go, which is I think what made it kind of famous with Google, is they built a Go playing robot powered by reinforcement learning that did very well. But this is something that allows you to kind of dynamically optimize complex processes like making baby food or producing noodles for mac and cheese. And then the third thing, and I would love to hear James's perspective on this one, so maybe he can share some knowledge when he comes back on, but quantum computing. So I'm very, very interested in quantum computing. Part of me is worried that it's blockchain. Which I'm a blockchain skeptic, for those of you that don't know me. So there's a lot of talk, but there's little kind of actual like value in industry is what I'm seeing. But quantum computing, the potential there could be absolutely massive if they get the cost down, they're able to manage the environmental challenges, they get the error rates down. when this comes to reality, it unlocks a tremendous amount of things we can't do today. Also, even simple things like all the encryption we have today is easily defeated by quantum computing. And again, we'll test James on this one, but this is what my security team says. So I mean, something like that to me is fascinating, right? So like, if this type of technology comes up, it radically changes what we do and how we do it. So the real stuff is like neural networks, reinforcement learning. The airy-fairy stuff is, whoa, what's going on with quantum computing? When does this become a real thing that has real consequences, both positive and negative, for Kraft Heinz, for us as humans in the world?
I love it. And I guess everyone on this line can probably tell that Eric and I could happily geek out and carry on this for at least the next 5 hours. But I'm conscious of time. I want to make some time to get to everybody else's questions. So James, if you're back with us, maybe we flip to some of those if that works. But Eric, thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
I am indeed back. Merely mention my name and I appear where I am called. Yeah, so I think, sort of the 3 or 4 word response to Eric's question about quantum computing, big if true. I mean, I'm also very excited about it, but there are a lot of sort of practical things that are standing between quantum computing and real life applications. So we'll see. So yeah, we got some great questions in the Q&A function. So let's start with those. I'm going to combine 2 questions, Lisa's question and Lydia's question, because I think they both involve this really interesting idea of data ownership. So for example, Lydia was asking specifically about notions of transitive ownership. So for example, if I give my data to the Kraft website, then what happens if the Kraft website wants to turn around and give it to some advertiser or some other company? How do we as users understand that such a sort of third-party data sharing is or isn't happening? And then I think if we look at Lisa's question, she's basically asking another question along the lines of data ownership. So what happens when a user goes to your site? That site might be taking that data that you submitted, analyzing it in some way, monetizing it in some way. But once again, there might be this sort of specter of third-party data sharing or things like that. Ownership of information is also very important in the context of things like GDPR, for example. So could you maybe just talk about generally your ideas about who owns data, users versus companies? How should we think about data ownership in the context of third-party data sharing agreements?
Boy, so it's a fantastic question, and like I wish I had 5 minutes to go read our disclosure on the website just to make sure that I can give like a super precise answer, because the honest answer is I personally don't know off the top of my head how exactly how and when we pull data back if there is a retraction, right? So if you, James, go to a website where you share data with us and you say I want to opt out, right? For sure, we have processes that go in, identify your unique data, and remove that. And this is something that we monitor and audit because it's important, and also because it's a legal requirement, right? So, in for example, GDPR, I mean, there are severe penalties associated with not complying with those requirements. When it comes to third-party data, so I get data from you, and then I combine it, or I send it to somebody else. Just being very transparent, I would have to read it to make sure I understand exactly where we have to retract versus not. So it's a fantastic question, and I'm sorry I can't give you a super precise answer. I can tell you the preference management is what we call it. So when you opt out, we do follow a very prescribed process because, like I said, of the importance associated with it. But the third party piece, I'm not sure.
Great. And by the way, that honesty is very helpful too. See, Eric, kids, everyone listening, in case Eric's ever deposed later on, that was the right answer. He'd have to check. He's not sure. Let's look at the agreements in more detail. So good for you, Eric, putting on a clinic there. And let me just ask a really quick follow-up question there. And this is related to some of the stuff you folks were talking about with respect to generative AI. So Eric, you were just talking a little bit about compliance. How do you comply when you're looking at technologies like generative AI, where we don't actually fully understand how they work? So if we don't fully understand how they work, how on earth can we comply with rules like data privacy? Yeah,
I mean, these are the conversations we're having right now. So, now you're starting to see the articles come out about like data leaks via generative AI, right? Or generative AI accusing a professor in another school of sexual harassment because it combined two articles together, right? And it said, oh, well, this professor, this sexual harassment, this professor sexually harassed. So yes, which is why we're being kind of cautiously optimistic about the technology. I mean, the way that we will deliver it from an enterprise standpoint will not be through somebody going to ChatGPT online and, you know, typing something in and getting a response, right? So, you know, our primary hyperscaler is Microsoft. We also make use of Google. So we have both Azure and GCP. They both have commercial offerings now in this space and one of the kind of big selling points is the compliance piece of this, but they're still very, very new tools. So this is, we're taking a cautious approach to this. Later on today, we have a meeting with Microsoft, kind of top to top, to get the, you know, the overview of, look, these are the commercial offerings. This is how the stack is going to evolve over time, because it is very new. And I agree with you, James, that the risk is high there on the.
I also think, Eric, right, it's really important to just be in the arena on this at the moment. The reality is the technology is running ahead of where the legal and regulatory frameworks and so on exist today. And, you know, that is a bit of a problem. And so the way in which I think companies in particular and individual awareness, but companies in particular are willing to engage in that debate, share how you're thinking about it, you know, what are the pluses, minuses, pros, cons, etc., and be part of shaping that agenda. That is going to be really important here, because we have seen a disconnect, a bifurcation between the pace at which the technology is running and the pace at which, you know, legal, regulatory, privacy frameworks are catching up.
Great. Let's see. So I think that there are two questions which I'll combine. So this is Yolanda's question and Jamie's question. And both of these questions are essentially asking about a theory of change. So in particular, let's assume that you've got someone in a company who isn't a C-suite person, who's, you know, lower down in the org chart. How can a person like that influence the people who are higher up in the org chart to think seriously about the ethical considerations of, you know, processing sensitive user data?
Yeah, and Liz, I would love your point of view on this as well, because you get to see this across multiple organizations. If you worked at Kraft Heinz, you know, my suggestion would be always talk to your boss's boss, et cetera. You know, these are kind of like standard communication channels, but many large organizations, including Kraft Heinz, I mean, we also have ethics hotlines. We have other channels where you can kind of go directly to the groups if you have questions or concerns that you're not able to get answers to. I mean, look, you know, I wasn't always a vice president at Kraft Heinz, right? So, I mean, you know, I've also lived that life as well. And, you know, I mean, so I can certainly, the question resonates with me. And what I would suggest is, you know, work with your boss. Think about the kind of ethics or the speaking up hotlines. Also, depending on where you're working at, this is going to be easier or harder. Let me explain. So many companies like Kraft Heinz are on this digital transformation journey. One of the core tenets of digital transformation is this idea of building these self-empowered teams and letting them go and do the things that they need to do. Where we have done that, you see people lower in the organization from kind of an org chart standpoint. They get a bigger voice, right? Because they are now part of this self-empowered team that are just going off and doing what they need to do. So, you know, I would also ask yourself, if you find yourself in a place where you feel like your voice isn't being heard, and, you know, I mean, we use the example of data ethics, which is an important one, but it could apply to other ones as well. Like, look, you know, if you're feeling like you're in a big kind of, you know, large corporate structure where you can't find your breath or, you know, find your voice or whatever it is, I mean, also consider that there could be other org models that make you more comfortable or present greater opportunities for you. So, I mean, it's been really remarkable to see kind of, because look, Kraft and Heinz, both 100-year-old companies, right? So these companies are very, very old. They came together in 2015. So, you know, we have a lot of baggage, both good and bad, associated with that. And so we're very much an old company and a new company at the moment, because we're on this kind of transformation journey. And it's been really exciting and empowering to see the digital teams that we've stood up to be able to have kind of that louder voice and to be able to kind of control their own destiny. So, you know, again, think about the role that you're in. And if if you're not seeing what you want, also consider that there could be alternative roles, alternative teams that might provide you a greater opportunity.
And I think that the reality is that, certainly in my experience, many of the very best ideas and pushes and nudges are not coming from the top down. They are coming, from deeper within the organization, to really understand what this could mean. So I would flip it the other way, Yolande, and say, well, what happens if you don't do this, right? If you're not living it every day? Is that back to Eric's test of the organization that he wants to live in, or he wants his kids to live in? Will that work if you're not doing this? And I'll give you one example. I was with a whole bunch of PMs a while ago now who were part of really getting underneath the skin of responsible product management, and that didn't come as a top-down edict of the right way to do this and a right way to think about it and so on. It came from folks saying, oh, actually, how much data do I really need in my product? I'm not just going to go out and say I've got to get everything in. I'm going to think about this responsibly to get just what matters, not the other way around. So I'm personal view, but I think some of the best advances and innovations in this space are coming from within the organization and not from edict. So please keep doing it.
And Kate, forgive me. I think I called you Liz a moment ago. I'm so sorry.
You did, but I quite like the name. I might go with it.
It's a great name. It's a beautiful name. So please forgive me.
This is it's so poignant. That's why we have these seminars, bringing people together, exactly. Calling them, whatever seems to be motivated by the spirit of the conversation. So this is great. So maybe to sort of tie things up, let me go to Usha's question, which I think in answering it might give, both of you sort of a good opportunity to sort of summarize some of the things you've been saying recently. So she basically asked, how do you convince teams to think ethically and basically incorporate all of these great ideas you've been mentioning around digital trust and safety? Like, if you had one piece of advice that both of you would give to, let's say, a manager of a team for trying to motivate that team's members to think about digital trust and safety as a first order sort of principle, what would that piece of advice be?
Go ahead, Liz/Kate.
Yeah, exactly. Come up with another one. I'm a carrots girl, not a sticks girl, right? So my way of motivating people on this is about the power of, the benefit that you can actually have on the customer relationship or on the level of innovation that you're going to unlock as a result. And I would show them the art of the possible and the power that that can have. And for me, that has always been the stronger motivating factor.
I completely agree. If people understand why it's important, they tend to get in line pretty quickly, right? But being able to connect kind of maybe what to many would be a nebulous topic of digital trust to something that's important to you or to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, I think is an excellent way to do it. And then I come back to the Eric Nelson protocol of are we creating a company that we're proud to work at? Are we creating a company that we'd be proud for our kids to work at? And, I think that's something that most people can rally behind because, you make it personal. And then people care more when it's not just kind of a they, it's a me. Now, all of a sudden, I'm more on the hook for being good.
Awesome. Thanks so much for those great answers right there and also throughout the panel session. It's 2:29. How amazing is this? We're going to end, I think, right on time. But before we do that, let me hand it over to Jen for a few final words.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the three of you. And this concludes our series on data leadership this spring. So I want to say a special thanks to Liz Grennan at McKinsey, who has not only led some of these discussions, but has also had a major hand in organizing and bringing the series to life. So thank you. We will be back in the fall with a new set of HDSI industry seminars. So if you'd like to stay informed, please sign up for our newsletter. And with that, one more huge thanks to today's speakers for their time. And thanks to you, our audience, for all your thoughtful contributions. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks.